Right. Yeah, good morning, Mr. Grayling. Nice to see you here. Absolutely hear what you say there. And you and I visited Hampshire Probation Trust, which is one of the first you visited after you launched the document. But I just want to home in, if I may, with you on managing risk and managing escalating risk and de-escalating risk as well. Quite a lot of the evidence that's being put before us and that I've heard from people who've contacted me since the documents come out is that the concern point seems to be around who manages risk and the movement between low, medium, high risk. So somebody said to me, risk is a dynamic, not a static entry, and the government seemed to presuppose that an offender, once they've been designated low, high or medium risk, then stays in that category for the duration of their supervision. And I've also heard people say that moving offenders between probation officer or between probation trust is the moment of particular risk, and I think there is concern within the probation sector as who is responsible, where there are multiple requirements. Who is responsible for managing that risk up and down the scale?
Ultimately, I mean, the management of it, the decision making about do you refer someone back to court, do you bring somebody into multi-agency supervision, has to and will remain with the public sector. But I think that the idea that people can't be moved around is just simply not right. I mean, the truth is, in a current probation trust, you might well have a more junior probation officer looking after an offender, something begins to happen, somebody more senior steps in and says, right, I'll take over that case. Now that happens today in probation trusts up and down.
But the key point is that happens under one roof, under one umbrella. And I think the concern is where there are lifestyle movement providers, for want of a better term, that have come into the public probation service. Is it a case that they're sitting round that table and they're then part of that team under that same umbrella and they then can be part of moving that risk? Or is there a concern that there's that disconnect between them?
Let's look at this in practical terms. What I expect to happen, what I intend to happen, is that you will have a centre of the kind that is run by, already today, by many of the voluntary sector organisations like the St Giles Trust, the centre I've been to, which I hope that some of this committee have been to, where I think you have the kind of supportive, thoughtful environment that can make a genuine difference to help turn the lives of offenders round. But equally, I think it is important in the world we build that in that centre there are sitting a couple of public protection officers, trained probation officers, whose job it is to say, to keep in touch with all the people who are doing the mentoring of offenders, for us to have a clear requirement on the contracting organisation to highlight breaches, to highlight serious developments that might cause a decision to be taken to bring someone back into multi-agency supervision. And for the public protection person sitting there to say, right, okay, there's clearly an issue here, we'll take those back into public control. Now, when I've talked to probation trusts, and I've been through a number of case studies with probation trusts to understand how this works, very often it is a very, the thing that triggers the alert is a very material change. It might be they're arrested. It might be that there is a significant relationship breakup. At that point, of course, we would want a trained probation officer to do a further risk assessment. I'm expecting somebody to come out of prison, a probation officer having already carried out a risk assessment and said this is a low risk person. If there is then a material change to circumstances that requires a new risk assessment, I expect that to be done by the public probation person, and if necessary, if the risk is sufficiently serious, for them to be brought back under multi-agency supervision. But there is an assumption here, which I sometimes hear, that somehow the organisation doing the mentoring isn't going to have any interest in trying to spot material changes and head them off at the pass. Of course they're going to, because actually in the system of payment by results, it is their job to try and prevent people from reoffending and to work very hard to do so. And so I do not believe that, yes, of course, risk changes, of course circumstances change. But at the moment, we have a situation where around half the people who go to prison reoffend, and where the people in prison have typically been through several community punishments, been through probation already, and yet are going on to reoffend. And over the past 5-7 years, if we look at the data for the last Parliament, for example, reoffending rates actually rose. So what we've got at the moment is not doing the job. There is good work being done in the probation world, I fully accept that, but we're not leveraging all the skills we can bring to bear on this. And I think that there are new elements of support that can make a difference. I don't believe that adding in organisations that have got that expertise, who have a vested interest in keeping reoffending down, means that we're somehow going to get a collapse in case management. As long as we maintain a clear position that says it is ultimately the job of the individual probation officer who's sitting in that centre to say, right, I'm going to take that case over because there's clearly a major problem here, and that will be the case.
But here's the point, as long as they feel they have the authority to do so.
Yeah.
Because so instead of bringing new providers under the existing roof, you're effectively talking about extending the size of the roof, because you've then got the public protection officers out there in the new providers who are able to spot that escalating risk and pull it back.
Well, what I have is a smaller, more specialist service. And one of the things which we'll come back and talk about is the way I think we should continue to develop the profession. We have a specialist service, public protection teams, whose job it is to work with the courts, whose job it is to do risk assessments of individuals as they leave custody, whose job it is to do recalls to court, to deal with breaches when they happen. But alongside that, we're actually putting a more supportive, more life management focused element of support that says, where are these people living? Have we got them booked into rehab? Have we got them booked into the local college if there are skills needs? Are they really turning up to participate in the work programme? And an element of befriending and support. Go back to those people coming out of prison. 25% of them were in care as children. These are people who don't know how to get their lives back together again. And the support that's more focused on mentoring, I think, is more likely to add an extra dimension to what we do. As long as we do not lose, which we won't, the ultimate requirement for there to be a trained professional who can spot indications of harm, who talks regularly to the mentor teams who are looking after offenders, say the kind of thing you need to watch out for is X, who will take a look over the shoulder when something happens and says, be wary, let me know if something else happens, who, if things escalate, can say, this is somebody I need to bring back into public multi-agency supervision.
So just very finally, you mentioned...
I need to move on to McDonald.
Okay.